Yes, I can.
All right. So, guys, welcome to this interactive webinar. We're very glad to have you, Masa, with us. It's indeed a pleasure to have you back and to see you live here. Amazing feeling I'm getting here, as if you're right besides us in this lockdown. These kind of webinars are really awesome, and to have you with us deliver this webinar to our community and to the folks in India, I think this is amazing. Okay, and let me just quickly brief folks about you. Guys, it's Harsh, if you can start the recording, right? It is indeed a great pleasure to have you, Masa, with us. Masa, guys, is a dear friend, and he is basically a steering committee member with ATA. But other than that, I think he is founder and principal of Valueinnova, a very nice and a big, large company having business in America and South America as well. He contributes to the knowledge work industry as a steering committee member, not only for ATA, but for DevOps Plus Plus Alliance and Kanban for Knowledge Work Alliance. He is also a coach, trainer on XScale, Kanban, and Scrum, as well as senior consultant with Qatar Consortium. He was basically doing he did R&D at Apple Incorporation. He was there working with Apple. He was a founding team member of 5 startups in Silicon Valley. 2 were acquired by large corporations, and he created the key organizations at 3 of them for the entire company, is not limited to just the technology side. It's indeed our pleasure to have basically Masa with us again. I really want to thank him that he is with us, and he's going to deliver this webinar on improving quality, efficiency, and efficacy with XScale. I'm sure that you guys will really enjoy. So with this, Masa, I'm going to stop sharing, and the screen is all yours.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aditya, for your kind introduction. And hello, everybody, wherever you are in the planet. I hope that you are staying safe and healthy. These are tough times to everybody. But anyway, let's have some fun here, hopefully. Anyway, I'm in Utah at this moment. So let's get into topic. First off, I want to invite all of you to stop thinking about testing and let's focus about thinking about quality. Okay, so that's the intent in this talk, is to see things from the quality standpoint and not from the testing standpoint. Okay, so I did some research on Google Trends, and what I found is that between 2004 and 2019, I cannot go further back in time. We all know that the Agile Manifesto was published in 2001. However, however, Google doesn't have data before 2004 because it didn't exist. So this is what we have, but it's still relevant. So what I found is that Agile popularity grew between 28% to 72% within that time frame. And we can see the curve at the end, at the bottom of the screen. And we can see how it was, somewhat steady, how Agile became more and more popular across the planet. So this was 16 years. I also went and checked against Scale Agile. And it's just very impressive because it was only within the last 6-7 years that the popularity went from 1% to 92%. So that's very, very impressive. But what is really important is, what does that mean? I mean, why is that there was this staggering difference between just Agile and Scale Agile? And it's obviously because most businesses are large enterprises. So once Agile proves some success at a smaller scale, then okay, let's try at large industries, which is obviously, they have a larger slice of the entire market. So this slide is from the State of Agile survey from CollabNet, originally known as version 1. And we can see how it's a very large percentage of organizations that have over 100 people. So you can see how it's between 100 and 1,000, 33%, and then 20% on each one of the slices that go to 5,000 and over 5,000 people. So what this makes it very clear is that large organizations have a very urgent need to be able to do better. And they think that Agile can help them with that. So that's good news from the Agile standpoint. At the same time, what we have to understand is that in the end, it is all about quality. If things are not done with the right quality from the very beginning, sooner or later is going to have some repercussions. So what we have to do when we think about shift left, we should really, really think about shift leftmost, meaning we shouldn't focus on just shifting our quality related activities to the left within what has to do with actually building the product. Be it software development, be it building a car or a phone or building, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't stop just with what is the construction. It has to go as far left as possible, and what that means is the very beginning of the value chain. And that's extremely important. So the question then comes, how is this going? Is Agile really delivering as promised at large scale? And so what we found also from the CollabNet State of Agile survey is that only 6% of the Agile practices are enabling a great or a high amount of adaptability to market conditions. And that's actually very shocking. I mean, it's like only 6%? This is kind of crazy, right? I mean, we expected to have a much better result than that. 6% is actually quite embarrassing. At the same time, also only 12% of the competency with the Agile practices across the organization is actually happening. So what that means is the benefits from Agile are way below expectations, right? So what can we do to change the game? So, well, first off is, and this is very important, don't focus on the method. Don't focus on applying Kanban or Scrum or XP or SAFe. That's not the focus. That is just the mechanics of a way in which we can achieve agility, but that is not agility, okay? So the focus has to be on quality and how to do that in an efficient and effective way, right? And what we have to understand is that the larger the organization or the larger the project, the higher the degree of complexity that we're going to encounter. So one way in which we can help change the game is through a method that isn't very well known yet, is relatively new, and it's called XScale. It's very, very powerful. And XScale actually is an acronym. And that acronym, what it means is the X is for exponential return, S for simple design, C for continuous throughput, A for autonomy, L for learning triple loop, and E is for ecosystems thinking. XScale has many components and much more than what we can cover within the time that we have for this webinar. So I'm going to focus just on a couple of these practices. So let's talk a little bit about simple design. I think that this one is going to be very easily grasped by you guys. The idea is actually amazing. So let's think, for example, the iPhone. Regardless of whether you own an iPhone or not, and regardless of whether or not you consider that the iPhone is amazing, some people like other devices better than the iPhone. Independently of that, we all, I think, agree in that the development of the iPhone and bringing the iPhone into market was a milestone from many perspectives, not only technologically, but also in terms of market. And it really changed the world. So the question is, how did that happen? I mean, was it like, something entirely radically different from whatever else existed there? And the answer is no. Actually, it was something very interesting. Before the iPhone was brought into market, there were other devices, particularly by Nokia. And Nokia developed, for example, the product you see there on the screen. And what is interesting is that all those products have almost the exact same functionality that the iPhone provided. And nevertheless, all these products failed in the market. It wasn't that they were out there and they were successful and then the iPhone ate the market. No, that didn't happen. What actually happened is that these products, by their own right, didn't succeed. So what happened is the functionality was there. Right? So what happened was a number of different circumstances. And one of them, which is the one that I want to bring to your attention, I would love to talk to you about the whole story behind this, but again, we don't have enough time. But what I want to bring to your attention is that the way the design happened. And what happened is that these Nokia products were actually developed applying design thinking. And we know that design thinking is a big deal. Pretty much everybody at least has heard about it. It's been applied in many businesses to develop products, and it's considered to be an amazing way to develop them. And yes, I agree that there is a really good way to do it, but it has its drawbacks. And Apple, what they did was something very different. And what they actually did is they applied a different concept that has to do with, interestingly enough, with the Agile principle of simplicity. And what we have here on the screen are drawings. All these drawings were made by Picasso. And if we want to look at them in a chronological way, the first one he drew is the one on the leftmost, upper leftmost corner. So this is the first one he drew. And it's the one that actually resembles more than any of the other drawings, a real bull. And then he started going through a progression, so through an evolution. And he went to the one that is right under the first one. And you can see that he started exaggerating some of the features of the bull. And then he started identifying what were those key angles and lines that define the bull. And then what he did, he started just removing whatever wasn't really necessary to identify the bull. So he started basically simplifying. So he started removing, shades and the color in this case black, but still is a color, and removing lines until he got to the simplest representation of the bull, which is the drawing that is right above his signature. And what we can see is that if any of these lines didn't exist, it would be very hard to identify it as a bull. Because of all those lines that exist there, we know it is a bull. And that includes even the ground. If the ground weren't there, it will be hard to identify. So basically what he did was he brought what is a bull, the way our brain recognizes a bull, to its minimal expression, meaning simplicity, right? The maximum expression of simplicity to represent a bull. So how did this happen? Well, this wasn't done through design thinking, as I mentioned. This was done through what is known as set-based design. And this is the first invitation that I have for you guys. One way to improve quality is by whatever it is that we're going to develop it based on set-based design and not based on lean startup or design thinking. Those are good, it's good knowledge, and it's good to take that into account, and it's going to help. But if you do set-based design, you're going to be better off. Okay, so allow the influence of lean startup and allow the influence of design thinking, but work on a set-based design fashion. Okay, and basically, what does that mean? Okay, you have an idea, it's something you want to create and develop. And what you do is you explore all the different possibilities that have to do with it. in parallel. So basically what you do is you're going to go breadth first instead of depth first. So instead of taking one idea and going deep down that rabbit hole, and if it succeeds, great, and if not, then you go back and you go another route. What you do is you explore actually all of those different routes in parallel. And out of those, you're going to get one or more that are promising. Once you make that differentiation, then you actually go and explore those that are promising. Doesn't matter how many they are, and so on and so forth. So basically, for example, in this case, on the first round, only one was promising, the other two are ignored. And as we explore that one, on the second round, two of them are promising. The third one is not, we discard it, and then we explore those two. And what is going to happen, and you can see on the third round, where the importance of set-based design happens. Because we explored options 4 and 5, it was a mix of those two that created option 7. Option 7 would have never existed if we had considered only 4 or only 5. And that's the key. So as you go, progressing on creating your product, is that branching and merging of different learnings and explorations and designs that bring the final product to life. And that's what is amazing about set-based design. Yes, it is a little bit more costly, obviously. I think it's very evident. But at the end of the day, you get a much better product that has a far higher chance of being a more successful product on the market. And that's what we want at the end of the day, right? So that's the concept of set-based design. Very, very simple, yet very powerful. So that's the first invitation. What I want to bring to your attention now is I'm going to combine what is autonomy and the triple loop learning, which is the A and the L for XScale. So let's begin talking a little bit about autonomy. So let's say that we have a team, and that team consists of 6 team members, and then they have one manager. That could be the team lead, the team manager, the scrum master, or whatever. It depends on what method you are working on. But there's somebody who is the person who coordinates the team in some fashion. Okay. And let's say, let's think a little bit in a more traditional way. Let's say that 2 of these members want to communicate with each other, and we are under a command and control structure, just for the sake of introducing the concept. So what will happen under that structure is that the team member, in this case, let's say the guy who is there on the upper left, communicates with the manager, and let's say that his name is Tom, and he wants to communicate with John. So Tom tells the manager, hey, I have a question for John, and it's this. So the manager then relays that question to John. John answers the question to the manager, and then the manager brings the information back to Tom. In this case, what we have is what is known as a collaboration loop limit of 4. And that's very simple. It's 1 from Tom to the manager, 2 the manager to John, 3 John to manager, 4 manager to Tom. So that's a collaboration loop limit of 4. Okay. And this, as silly as it sounds, it occurs on some places. And maybe some of you have gone through this kind of experience. Now let's say that what we have is a large organization where we have a set of 6 teams that have this initial structure. And then we have one manager that manages all those 6 teams. Then we have the structure that is on the right side of the image. In this case, let's say that one member of one team wants to communicate with one member of another team. In that case, if we follow the same collaboration path as on the first case, the collaboration loop limit will be 8. I communicate with my manager with the manager that manages all the teams, that manager with the manager of the other team, the manager of the other team with the other team member, and then back. then we have a collaboration loop limit of 8. And this already tells us that this is crazy, right? It's too much time, the communication gets lost. Maybe what I wanted to ask or initially is not information that the other team member got. And his answer, the way he communicated, most likely is not the way I received it. So then the communication degrades. It's just not really the right way to do this. Imagine what happens if we have larger organizations. You have teams of teams of teams, right? And then you have teams of teams of teams of teams. So the larger the total number of people involved, and if we keep this structure of having small teams and the communication being done through intermediaries, then the collaboration loop limit increases. This contributes greatly to degradation of quality, to longer time, okay? And obviously, in the end, to not getting the product that we intended to get. So this is really not the best way to communicate, yet this is how it happens. And even though it isn't as bad as this, when we talk about the approaches of a large scale like LESS, Nexus, SAFE, and some other approaches, they're still rather heavy. I mean, they start creating teams of teams. They have a Scrum of Scrums. They have a Scrum Masters, Master Scrum Master, or Chief Scrum Master, and Chief Product Owner, and so on and so forth. So then basically what we're doing is, even if it isn't it doesn't have as many degrees of communication as what we see here, it has the tendency to get towards that. So maybe the number of the collaboration loop limit is lower, but it's still high. So the question is, how can we communicate effectively and efficiently at a large scale? Is there another way to do it, right? And basically what we want to do is consider some of the Agile values and principles, but also in XScale, and by the way, XScale is an approach to de-scalability. What this means is SAFE and LESS and those other approaches, what they did, if we think about it carefully, is when we apply agility at a small scale, is actually relatively easy, right? We have a Scrum with one team or two teams and things like that, and no big deal. Once we have a very large organization, a very large project to work on, then what the people who developed these Agile at scale approaches did was they increased the complexity of agility to get closer to the complexity of the large organization or project. The XScale goes the other way. So the idea behind XScale is we're going to simplify the complexity of the large organization or the large project as close as possible to the simplicity of Agile. So XScale is a de-escalation approach and not a escalation or scalability approach to agility. So that's why on this scaling we value authority and alignment over command and control as well. And here's where I want to introduce to you this aspect of zero command and control. So we know, and Agile tells us, we want to have self-organizing teams. We understand that. There's no need to discuss it or explain it. What we also want to do is we want to have self-managing streams of self-organizing teams. What this means is we have our self-organizing streams, and then we're going to put them together. We're going to get several of them, and they are going to form a stream. And that stream is going to be self-managing. As what we have to do is even bigger than that, and we have portfolios. What we want to do is a set of streams is going to form or is going to be taking care of a portfolio. And that portfolio is going to be self-directed. If we achieve this self-direction, self-managing, and self-organization, we are going to achieve command and control. So how do we do that? Okay, well, so the way XScale does it is we have teams, We have streams, okay? And the streams, they share business driver and constraint. And this is very important, this is a business perspective, okay? A stream is a set of teams that share one same business driver, okay? And a chapter is a group of representatives from teams with the same function. So for example, we can have a chapter of developers, a chapter of testers, a chapter of architects, a chapter of designers, and so on. And then a circle is a small group of representatives from the chapter. So then we can have one representative from the chapter of testers, one from the chapter of developers, one from the chapter of architects, and so on. And when we group and put together one representative of each one of these chapters, then we have a circle. So these are basic structures that we need to consider. And this is how it works. XScale also follows the principle of IATME. So basically, it doesn't matter what scale tells you. If you don't need it, don't do it. Don't use it, okay? So, and this is because we want to keep things simple. So if you have just one small team, and you with the developers and designers and the architect and the product owner or product manager or whoever, and that's all you have, you don't need to go beyond that. There's no need to scale anything and to start applying, complex structures. So we just keep it simple, and that's all you have. You don't need more than that. What happens at decision-making level? Well, XScale proposes something slightly different in terms of how decisions are made. And this is what we call leadership as a service. And the way it works is absolutely amazing. So let's say you have a team, and the team is all these 8 people that are on the right side of the screen, and then you have a leader, and the leader is the Scrum Master or the product manager or the project manager, or whoever is in charge of that team. When a decision has to be made, what we do, different from the traditional way of doing it, is the leader, depending on what is going to be discussed and what needs to be decided, is going to select one of the team members as the DRI. DRI means direct responsible individual. This idea is not original from XScale. Actually, Steve Jobs was the first person, as far as we know, to apply this concept. Maybe it was his idea, actually. And basically what it means is we're going to discuss something that has to do with legal issues. Okay, so if the guy down here with the glasses and the suit and the necktie is the attorney, then because this discussion has to do with a legal issue and the decision has a legal implication, maybe he's the right person to be considered the direct responsible individual, so then he is the DRI. And then what happens is that everybody starts going through a discussion, considering, architectural limitations, some considerations regarding the technology, that's going to be applied for development, the kind of testing that is going to happen, some aspects regarding marketing, and so on. So they start going through a discussion. If at the end of the discussion, there is a conclusion in which everybody agrees, then that conclusion is the decision. And that's it. There's no need to decide anything because the decision was made as the conclusion of the discussion. However, if for some reason at the end of the discussion we have more than one alternative, it could be 2 or 3 or more. And they say, well, we can do A or we can do B. And that's our conclusion. At that point is when the DRI actually exercises decision-making. So then in this case, the attorney is the one who will say, well, from these 2 alternatives, we should go for example, B. And at that moment, everybody just takes that as the decision, and execution is made based on that decision. And that's why it's called leadership as a service. The act of leadership, of making the decision, is a service that occurs only when there was not one conclusion, but when there were two or more options. Okay? Very, very powerful. Now, what happens, and the DRI again can be anybody. What happens if we start growing and we have a larger organization, we have a larger project, we need to have more than one team? Well, that's when we start applying these aspects of XScale, which is the moment you have, for example, two or more teams, then is when you can create your chapters. You have a chapter of analysts, a chapter of testers, of designers and developers, and so on. Okay? Now, all these teams are working on one same feature. And that's the kind of organization. If we have a large project and we have several teams, but each team is working on its own feature, you don't have to have a chapter for that feature. Okay? You only need it if you have more than one team. Okay? And then this structure can grow even bigger. It could be that you have something that requires an integration for all the operations that are happening. In that case, you can have a DevOps team or circle that is the stream integration chapter. Okay? So what is going to happen with those chapters? Why do they exist? Okay, so, well, before answering that question. So as you can see, if the project grows or the organization grows to the point that you not only have more than one team, but you have more than one product owner or product manager, scrum masters, and so on, you create chapters at that level as well. So you can have a chapter of product owners or product managers, a chapter of architects, and so on. So basically, what we are seeing here is that the exact same idea of having chapters when you have more than one team, you create chapters when you have more than one person at decision-making level. And this is what we call a fractal structure. The exact same way in which we organize and the same modus operandi that we apply at the smaller scale, we apply it at the larger scale. So that we don't need to learn anything new. It's the exact same structure. We just bring it to the next level. Okay? And that what this means is, again, simplicity. The same simple initial structure is applied. It doesn't matter if the organization has 100 people or 50,000 people. It still applies. Okay, it's the exact same structure. So now, what do we do, with those chapters? We want to make sure that the communication between two team members has the lowest collaboration limit possible, meaning the communication between them is as direct as possible. So one way in which we can make sure that the information that has to do with that large project is shared equally amongst everybody is the way I'm going to explain it next. Before I do this, just think about, if we think about just agility, you think about SAFe, for example, which is the most popular of the approaches at scale. You have business owners, you have product owners, you have release trained engineers, you have solution trained engineers. So you have all these different degrees of decision makers, depending on whether you're working at portfolio or solutions or program level. The thing is this, there's some knowledge that the RTE has. How do we ensure that everybody, all the teams for that stream, for that value stream, have the knowledge and information that the RTE got? The same thing at solutions level, the solutions trained architect, or the product owner, or the business owner, or the enterprise architect. How do we ensure that the information didn't get lost in terms of that person or those people have it, but everybody else don't. How do we avoid that from happening? Well, so this way. So we know that a chapter is a set of individuals from one same role, right? All the architects are one chapter, all the developers are one chapter. And then we have circles, right? And it's one representative of each. So what we do is, let's say that we have 3 teams, and each team has one person from each role, and all of the teams have the same roles and the same number of people, just to make easier the explanation. So we have that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take those those roles and get them together as chapters. So that way, the knowledge that one developer has, let's say he came up with a new idea, something that worked really well in his team, he can share it with all the other developers or representatives of development from the other teams. Then we are actually sharing the local knowledge to all the teams for that particular role. And that way we keep in alignment all the testers, all the developers, all the architects, all the designers, etc. So this is one way in which we do that. These chapter meetings are actually short. They can be 20 minutes or half an hour. They don't need to be long meetings. And what that does is that ensures that we are sharing knowledge and that we are in alignment at function level. Now, we take one representative from one of each of those chapters and we bring them together as a circle. And as a circle, they share to all the other roles of the circle the knowledge that should be shared at that level. Okay? So we don't need to tell people that we change, for example, the way we are going to use variables, that we have some specific notation for that. But we want to share with them some relevant aspect of development that is going to impact testing and architecture and so on. So if it is something that is not just localized, we share it to the circle. And then once the circle meeting is over, which is also a short meeting, those people go back to their teams and they share the decisions that were made. And in the fashion of leadership as a service, they bring that knowledge back to their teams. So when this happens, anything that was developed in a local fashion is shared at chapter level, then at circle level, and then back to all the teams. So at the end of this, everybody has the same knowledge. Everybody is aligned with the same decisions that were made, policies that changed, everything. Everything that happened is communicated back to everybody, so everybody is in alignment and on the same page. Now, we know that agility tells us that we get together in a frequent fashion to be able to provide feedback and keep things, rolling and delivering and so on. So what we want to do is, so the question is, okay, what happens with that knowledge if we have the same representatives all the time? Well, we're going to fall into the same dysfunction that we have with LESS and with SAFE and all those other approaches, in which only the chief architect or the chief product owner have some knowledge and not everybody else. To avoid that from happening, in XScale, what we do is we actually rotate those roles. And the rotation works this way. It's an animation, so you will see this move. Okay? So basically what happens is that you do not have the exact same people from every chapter go to all the circle meetings and the console meetings. What you do is that each time there's going to be this meeting at circle level or stream level, you have 2 representatives from each for each team that is involved. And at the next meeting, the rotation happens in only one of those people. So basically, one of the 2 people who were at the first meeting doesn't go to that meeting. the other person goes to the second meeting, and then a new person goes to the meeting, and so on. So basically what is going to happen is that at every meeting, you have one new person and one old person. That allows continuity, that ensures that the knowledge is flowing in a natural way. Of course, once all the members rotated, then the original people start eventually go back to the council meeting. So what that happens is that, let's say every 6 council meetings, I am going to be at 2 of them, for example. And that allows the continuity. That allows everybody to express, then it is not my own biased opinion. It's not only what I capture, is what the entire team is actually capturing and learning and communicating and sharing. And this is what actually brings that zero command and control. So what we have here is an example. This is work that we did for a bank. It's the 3rd largest bank at its country. And what we see here on the upper left photo is we have the chapter meetings. Okay, so all the people that you see, these 4 people that you see on the leftmost side of that photo, I don't know, maybe they are the developers, maybe they are the testers, I don't know, they are some role. And the other group is some other role, and so on. So they are sharing their knowledge and their experiences and making decisions at that level. The photo that is below it, this is actually a council meeting. So we have, representatives from each role sharing knowledge and making decisions on how they're going to be working on what they are building. The photo on the upper right, the 4 people who are on the left side of that photo are customers. And the 2 people who are on the right side, there were more people, but I didn't capture them on the photo, are team members that are going to the customers to ask questions. And then we have artifacts and people working on it. This was an exercise that we did to have the people learn this. And what is interesting is that we had it was over 40 people that we have at this session, and it was half a day. And in half a day, they went from absolute command and control waterfall style to work in this way. In half a day, they learned how to do this. And why was it possible to do it in such a short amount of time? Because it's very simple. Okay? And again, because it was an exercise, the idea was to build a castle, and the castle was, the castle was to have some mix of modern and traditional style. That's why the walls are very simple. And you can see that there's consistency. The towers have the same style, the walls have the same style, even though there were different teams working on it. And there was not one single decision maker. There wasn't a project manager or a product manager telling them how to do this. The only information they had to begin with was the vision and the epics from the customers. And so basically, what we achieve by doing this is what we call the triple loop learning. Is we know how to do workflow, and workflow we learn it with the Agile methods, Scrum, Kanban, XP. They help us do that. So we already have that. Okay. Now value flow happens when you start getting a larger scale. And one method that is really good at helping us with value flow is Kanban. But Kanban doesn't bring leadership as a service, doesn't bring the structure that we learn. And that's what XScale brings. By doing this leadership as a service and zero command and control, what we achieve is 2 things. One of them is we improve the value flow, and then we bring finally into business agility the learning flow. And this is very powerful because agility tells us that we learn, we share knowledge and so on. But there is no methodology that actually has learning flow implicit as part of the method. They only say, oh yeah, we had to do it. And we do it in whichever way we can think of. Let's be creative and somehow share knowledge. But there's no an actual structured way, an effective way to do it, as far as we know, except with XScale. And that's why we call the triple loop learning. It's learning, value, and workflow that we achieve at teams, stream, and portfolio level. So that's what I want to bring to your attention. And this is it. So as you can see, very powerful, very simple. Fractal approach is very powerful. Other two approaches that have some degree of fractal structure implicit is one Henrik Nieberg developed that is known as the Spotify method, even though there isn't such a thing as the Spotify method. It's just a general idea that has some fractal structure behind it, and then you adapt it the way that works for you. And then Discipline Agile also has, to some extent, has a fractal approach, but none of them has a full-blown structured fractal approach the way XScale does. So this is what I want to bring to your attention, and I invite you to explore some more. Thank you so much.